In this video, we're going to complete the square. Now, you're going to complete the square every time you want to change general form of quadratic into vertex form. And we want to do that sometimes because it's actually easier for us to graph. And it could also tell some characteristics right away, like your vertex, your axis of symmetry, and so on. So there are some steps on completing the square. I have a set of steps already typed out, but I also wrote down another set of steps because I actually think the one that I wrote out is probably the faster method and easier method in completing the square. So we're going to focus mainly on these steps that I've written out. The first thing you can do is factor out the a in y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Then you're going to add b divided by 2, square it, and also subtract it. That b value is coming from that highlighted b. So if that b value was 2, then you would do 2 times 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and then square it, which is still 1. And then you're going to subtract that 1 as well. Then you're going to refactor it and combine that negative b over 2 all squared with the c value. So for example, I wrote this down for your b. If your b was 4, then you'll do 4 divided by 2, which is 2, square it, which is 4. So you're going to add 4 and subtract 4 in step 2 if your b was 4. Now let's do an actual example. I think that would make more sense to you after we do a numerical one. So your step 1 is to factor out the a. Our a in this case is 3. And you're only going to do it for the two terms, the one with the x squared and the x. And that's why I kind of bracketed those two terms out, because that's what we're only going to do it for. So then we're left with x squared minus 4x. I'm just going to leave the 7 on the outside of that bracket. I'm not going to bother to factor it. Now my second step is to add b over 2 squared and subtract it. So in this case, my b is 4, and I did that over here on the side. So that's 4 divided by 2, which is 2, then squared it with it, which is 4. So I'm going to add and subtract 4. And notice I'm doing that on the inside of the bracket. Now I'm going to move this 4 out on the outside. And when I do that, I have to multiply it by 3 because this has been factored. And if I want to unfactor it, then I have to multiply it by 3 to get it back out. So that would be negative 12 then. My final step is to factor and then combine the negative b over 2 squared with the c. So I'm going to factor this portion over here now. Then our last step is to factor what I just highlighted there. So that's x minus 2 all squared. Then negative 12 plus 7 is negative 5. This is our final answer. And you can tell that this is our quadratic, but in vertex form. Let's try this again with another example. First step is to factor out the 4. And you only do to the first two terms. We're going to leave the negative 23 on the outside. Second step, we have to do 8 divided by 2 all squared, because that's our b value. You can say negative if you want, but it really doesn't matter because once we square it becomes positive anyway. And we also have to add it and subtract it. So just to simplify your work, you could just ignore the negative in front of your b when you're completing the square. So this is going to be 8 divided by 2, which is 4. 4 squared is then 16. So that means we're going to add and subtract 16. Now I'm going to take this 16, this negative 16, and put it outside of our factored bracket. So I need to multiply 16 by 4. That's negative 64 then. And our last step is to refactor this. So this will be x minus 4 all squared. Negative 23 minus 64 is negative 87. This is our final answer. And again, you can tell that this is in vertex form. When you're factoring it, make sure you don't factor so that you have a product of factors that are different. It has to be a product of factors that are the same, so we can have x plus or minus some numbers all squared. We could also use the relationship between the a and the b value of our quadratic to find the x value of the vertex given our equation in general form. Also, given your x-intercepts, you can also find the x value of the vertex. And the x value of the vertex is the midpoint between the two intercepts. So you'll do x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So in these following examples, we're going to utilize those two pieces of information. In the first one, we want to determine the coordinates of the vertex of the parabola with the equation. In order to do that, you can complete the square, and you could also use one of these formulas as well. So if we just want to know what the coordinates of the vertex is, we can utilize this one up here. So our b value is negative 12, and our a value is 3. So that's positive 12 over 6, which is 2. This is your x coordinate. Then we can find our y coordinate by plugging 2 back into our original quadratic equation. So y is equal to 3 times 2 squared minus 12 times 2 plus 7. So that's just our quadratic equation here. I'm just plugging the 2 in to solve for a y. So that's 3 times 4 minus 24 plus 7, which is 12 minus 24 plus 7, and this is negative 5. So then our vertex is 2, negative 5. And if you take a look, we already completed the square for example 2. So if we go back up and take a look, this is one of the first examples we've done. And we had this for our vertex form, and reading this out, this would be 2, negative 5. And that's exactly what we got over here, 2, negative 5. For the next example, we want to find the axis of symmetry. This is even easier than example 2 because then we don't have to go through finding our y value. We just need to find that x coordinate, and that's it. So we're going to use again negative b over 2a. Your b is 5. Your a is negative 2. So that means x, your axis of symmetry, is x equals 5 over 4. The last one, it says determine the y coordinate of the vertex. So it's very similar to question 2, except that we don't need to state our final answer as the vertex. We only care about the y value. So the first thing we can do is find the x coordinate of the vertex. So negative 3 is our b, and a half is our a. So that's positive 3 over 1, which is 3. This is our x coordinate. Then we're going to plug it into our y. So we have a half 3 squared minus 3 times 3 minus 8. This is just the equation that was given to us in the beginning. Now I'm just plugging the x equals 3 in there so that we can find the corresponding y value. So 3 squared is 9. 3 times 3 is 9. Negative 9 minus 8 is negative 17. Now I want to make sure that I have a common denominator so I can combine these as fractions. And I can multiply this by 2, top and bottom. So our final answer here is negative 25 over 2, which is the same thing as saying negative 12.5. So if you take a look at completing the square, I have a ton of questions for you to try from 1 through 15 because completing the square does take a lot of practice, so you get used to it. Please try to follow the steps that I have here and look at the examples of how we've done those.